It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
They came to me and said, Dad, what happens if you put a rock in the microwave? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to know. And they're like, can we? I'm like, just make it 30 seconds.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
We so appreciate you jumping onto Apple Podcasts and letting us know what you think about the podcast. We've had some reviews come through recently, and we haven't talked about them a lot lately, Kylie, but people have been really, really nice about the stuff that we're doing on the Happy Families podcast. It's making a difference. Like Shona, who just jumped on the other day and said, this podcast is like a safety net. When I feel like I'm failing and struggling in motherhood, this podcast catches me up and helps me back up. Justin and Kylie are so warm and comforting to listen to, and I love that they keep it real with their listeners. Very grateful I found this podcast. Shona, we're so grateful that you found us. Thank you for doing that. Please, if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love to get your reviews. Your reviews help other people to find the podcast. All you've got to do is go into the app, click on our podcast, and give it 5 stars. If you can write a sentence or two about it, that's even better. Thanks for listening. Thanks for giving up your time. Like, there's so much choice out there. We really appreciate that you're here and that you're a part of the Happy Families podcast. We also got some feedback, Kylie, and this was about your last week, your I'll Do Better Tomorrow. Came from Janine. Can I read this? Because this was the one that I felt like it was one of the best things you've ever done on the podcast. It was certainly better than anything I've ever done on the podcast. It was so good. And Janine just said, wow, I love every podcast you share, but this one has been hard to listen to and I felt the need to respond. Not that I like starting the day with tears. Kylie's incredibly emotional podcast was like no other. As with every episode, there is so much to explore, reflect, enjoy, ponder. Despite being very confronting at times, the topics discussed give me a yearning for more. And then she says quite simply, you, Kylie, are awesome. Thank you just seems so not enough. How nice is that? So thank you, Janine. Oh, and then there was a PS at the end. I've stopped crying now. We are so glad that you appreciate the podcast, and we love that you listen. That's why we do it, because we want to share our insights and our learnings so that we can help you to make your family happier. I had a learning this week. And it's not my experience. It's just something that really hit me hard. And what it was I've been doing this for 20 years now. I've been researching, studying, being intentional, trying to become a better dad and sharing ways that people can make their families happier for 20 years. And I feel like in the last couple of weeks, a whole lot of stuff has just suddenly started to make sense. I feel like I'm seeing things in parenting now that I've never seen before. I feel like I'm getting stuff as a parent that I've never gotten before. And it's just been so magic. I'm so grateful for the challenging times that our kids give us, because I'm seeing something in me and something in you as we have the challenges that we have, that like we're getting stuff right. We're getting stuff better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. The reason you're feeling like you've had this aha moment isn't because you haven't seen it before. It's the fact that it's finally starting to click. All of that intentional practice that you've been doing for the last 20 years as you've been reading and learning and growing is finally starting to become habitual. It's finally starting to just be a natural part of what you do, as opposed to that conscious
20 years though,
painful effort.
But it's still painful. But like, case in point, the other night, one of the kids was just having the worst time. She was tired, she was angry, she was being vitriolic to her sisters. It was the house felt hostile. It was not what our house is about, and it's not what the culture of our family is about. And so badly, and I hope I can say this without people judging me the wrong way, but I so badly kind of just wanted to bang her head against the wall so that she'd go to sleep. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in jest. I would never ever do that. But I was like, just stop it. I don't want to deal with this. That's what was happening internally. I'll do whatever I can to just stop the pain, because right now you're being a pain and we need to stop it. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I said, we just need to go for a walk. And we went for a walk, and while we were walking, I said, you're having a horrible time, but I love you no matter what. You can do and say whatever you need to me or to mum or to your sisters, and it won't stop me loving you. I absolutely, unconditionally, completely in every way love you. And I won't not love you just because you're having a bad night. I didn't get her in trouble for doing the wrong thing. She already knew it was wrong. And I had this insight. My job when my child is suffering, when my child is being challenged, is not to add to her challenge. It's not to add to her suffering. My job is to relieve that suffering or help her to find a way through it. And just going for that walk and spending that time gently reaffirming the unconditionality of my love for her, oh my goodness, like she came back and she sobbed in her room for a few minutes, but then she came out and joined the family and she was a different kid. And I'm sure, I'm absolutely convinced that that is the answer to all of our parenting problems. Being able to do it is super hard, and I'm not going to pretend that it's easy in any way, shape or form, but that's been a massive insight for me, and I'm so grateful for what our kids teach us about ourselves. But anyway, that's not what the purpose of... Well, I guess it kind of is what our I'll Do Better Tomorrow was all about, but that's not the story I was going to share. I want to share mine in a second.
Oh, so you're cheating. Yeah, you're going to share two stories.
Totally cheating, but you're going to go first because it's ladies before gentlemen, even though I just kind of went first. But your turn, I think.
So earlier in the week, we had a massive deluge of rain.
Oh, hasn't it been wet?
At home. And
oh, my goodness.
Emilie found herself outside in her swimmers, jumping in puddles and just having a ball.
Ruining my lawn.
And at one point, she found a little lizard and decided that she was going to be this lizard's mum. And so literally for the entire afternoon, her and the next door neighbour were warming up rocks in the microwave.
It's so funny. They came to me and said, Dad, what happens if you put a rock in the microwave? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to know. And they're like, can we? I'm like, I didn't even ask why. I'm like, yeah, rightio, just make it 30 seconds. And they've done it 30 seconds. They're like, it's warm. What happens if we do 60 seconds? I'm like, oh, it's a rock. What can really go wrong? They're putting water on the rock, then they're putting the rock in the microwave, heating it up. So after 60 seconds, they pull it out and they're like, oh, now it's really warm. Dad, feel this. I'm like, wow, the microwave actually makes rocks hot properly. It made the rock hot. I was like, what are you doing this for? And
they recognised that lizards are cold-blooded and it was a really cold day because of all the rain. Yeah. So they decided to make a nice warm bed for the lizard. So this is just one of those tiny little, a
little skinky sort of lizard, yeah.
Well, I don't know how she managed to do it, but she's almost like tamed this lizard. She was holding it. It didn't run away. It just...
It's terrified, comatose.
So she built some little homes for it out of Lego, and she looked after this lizard all day. And come bedtime, she wanted to keep it in its little Lego house inside. And I just suggested to her that it was time that the lizard went back to its own family. Well, she had actually found the lizard in the neighbour's yard. So at 8:30 at night, she wanted to return it to the neighbour's yard. Right. Which I obviously said no to. And it took a little bit of convincing her that she needed to do it, but she finally went outside sobbing.
Yeah.
As she placed this lizard into the garden, said a goodbye, and she stormed back into the house. She threw her Lego house that she'd made for it on the ground. It shattered into a million pieces, and she jumped into bed and covered herself up in the covers. And so I went over and I gave her a big hug. And I said, what's wrong? I said, you're really, really sad. And she just said, I'm so selfish.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my goodness. And I said to her, do you want to talk about it? She said, no, I don't want to talk about it. She said, I'm so selfish.
Because she wanted to keep the lizard instead of letting it go back to its family and be in nature.
Such a beautiful heart. She has such a beautiful heart. And she's been begging for a pet for a long time.
And Lizzie the lizard was going to be the pet. She was convinced.
And it just reminded me of how innocent and how pure our children are. And sometimes when we get caught up in the messiness of family life, we miss it.
I think there's another lesson here as well, though, and that is that it's really tempting to say to your kids, I'll stop it, cut it out, don't be silly. And had you done that, you would have been getting her in trouble thinking that she was wanting to keep a lizard inside the house. But what was really going on is she's already feeling bad. She's feeling like she's selfish, like she needs to be a better human because she's putting her desires above that of this poor little lizard. Kind of goes back to that idea that I mentioned before when I was sharing the story that I didn't technically share because I've got to share a story in a second for I'll Do Better Tomorrow. The idea that our job is not to add to our children's suffering. Our job is not to add to the challenge they're feeling. And quite often we don't even know what it is that they're suffering through, or we think we understand their suffering, but it's a different suffering for something entirely else outside of what we were thinking. Does that make sense? Have I just made a mess of what I was trying to say?
I think you made a little bit of a mess of it, but I think we get the gist.
I'm going to share my story, if that's okay with you.
Do I have a choice?
All right, let's dive into this one. So we have been, like every family in Australia, I'd imagine, I know that there are people who are struggling more And I know that there are people who are struggling less. But I think that most of Middle Australia right now is saying financially, economically, we do not like what is happening. Fuel prices are through the roof. Interest rates are skyrocketing. And we happened to have bought a house, I think the very week that the market peaked. Like we bought at the very, very, very top of the market. Within 2 or 3 weeks, the housing market started to plateau and drop off. And we bought the week that it all just went bonkers. And interest rates have been going up, and cost of food and everything's really, really expensive, and we've been kind of going backwards a little bit. So I said to the family on Sunday, let's sit down and go through the bank statements, the credit card statements. We're going to audit our expenses. And the kids were, oh, do we have to? And so we divided it up. We've got schooling, and we've got food, and we've got fuel, and we've got just everything that we have to spend money on, extracurricular activities, blah, 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 blah. And each of the kids, because we have so many of them, had a different category to look after. So I would read out the credit card statement. It was Coles, $162, petrol, $112, whatever it was. I would read out every single line. We did 3 months of expenses. And it was so funny. At the end of the first week, the kids were like, how much longer have we got to go? And I said, guys, this is only the first week. And they almost fell off the couch, every one of them. They were like, it cost us how much just for a week of living? I'm like, guys, you're expensive to keep. Like, feeding this many people in our family costs a lot. And they're like, no way. And at the end of it, we had this incredible conversation where the kids, because they sat there and calculated, this is our weekly and our monthly and our quarterly expense for food and for fuel and for swimming lessons and for piano and whatever else the kids have got in their lives, and the things that you and I are also valuing and saying are important. They've looked at it and gone, costs a lot to live, doesn't it? Like, we didn't have to give them a lecture and say, kids, turn off the lights, kids, turn off the water. We didn't have to tell them to stop wasting food. They've looked at it and they're like, we need to do something about this, don't we? And you and I are kind of going, yeah, we do. We really need to do something about it. Then we just simply said to them, so what do you reckon we should do? And they came up with a whole lot of solutions. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we've got to do this better and that better. And I felt like, in terms of teaching your kids financial literacy, what a powerful lesson for them to actually go through the credit card bills with you, go through the bank statements with you, write out every single item and then tally it up.
When our kids were younger, especially the older three, we actually sat down, and when we started giving them pocket money and we went through a budget, we created
we taught them about budgeting.
A minor budget for them based on their $5 or whatever they were getting each week. And I think that those lessons were really important for them. And as they get a job, we then go through that process with them again.
Going to pay board, got to have money to donate to a good cause, got to have spending money, got to have saving money. Yep.
And then as the children are slightly older and they get the driver's license, petrol needs to be added into that, and servicing and things like that with the car. And so we've had those kinds of conversations with the children for a very long time. But to actually have them sit there and see how much it costs to run our family, it's all been, all of their conversations have been very insular because it's all just been about them.
Yeah.
But for them to actually participate and sit down and see how much is required for our family to function, I think was really eye-opening for them. And, like you said, just those recognition that there was so many different things that they actually could do as the little people in the relationship to make a difference.
What I also loved about it is that our 20-year-old daughter, who's about to move out of home, as we started to go through this, she whinged and she's like, I have to pay all my own stuff anyway. I'm paying board and this has got nothing to do with me. Do I have to do this? And we said, we think that there's value in this for you. Just stick around.
I acknowledged to her that this was a life skill, and I thought that it would be beneficial for her, even if she didn't feel like it was, specifically related to her right now.
At the end of it, she said, that was actually really good. I'm going to go and do my own bank accounts right now. So she disappeared into her room for a couple of hours, wrote out every single expense, divided them up into different categories. She came out and said, Dad, you wouldn't believe how much money I'm spending on fast food every single month. I can't believe how much money I'm spending on fuel, on this, on that. She said, I've really got to do something about this. And so watching our 20-year-old daughter sit through like an hour and a half of doing it with us and then go into her own room and do it for her own accounts, I was like, yeah. She's figuring this out, and she's had some insights that are really valuable. So the take-home message is teaching your kids financial literacy has immediate payoffs once they start to understand what's going on. We didn't do it with Emilie. She's 8, and she didn't hang around. This was our 12-year-old and up. So I guess it's probably worth putting that out there. But we have done it with younger kids, and you can still have financial conversations. In fact, we've had podcasts about that over the last couple of years as well. So you can do a quick search if you want to find out what we recommend about that. But that's the big thing that I took out of the last week in terms of spending time with the kids. Having those conversations really makes a difference. We really hope that you've enjoyed the Happy Families podcast today. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, and Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We would love for you to join us tomorrow. Last chance, Happy Families Hot Mess Summit. All the details are at happyfamilies.com.au. Massive day with world-class, internationally renowned speakers who can help your family to be less of a hot mess. And it's all for less than $200. Please jump online now, happyfamilies.com.au. Click on the link for the Hot Mess Summit, and we'll see you tomorrow there. If you can't join the summit, you can always get a recording later. Just pay for it now. We'll send you the recordings. And if for whatever reason you can't do either of them, I guess we'll see you next Monday on the podcast. Have a great weekend. For more information about making your family happier, including that Happy Families Hot Mess Summit, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.